Thank you, Chair. And I had written in my notes, good morning, but now it's good afternoon. So, and I stand before you on your lunch. So I hope to make this short, and but hopefully as sweet as the other presentations. Okay, I come from the Philippines, and as you probably have heard, a typhoon, Lando by the local name, has just lashed across the country. I shall talk about the more storms later, but you know, in the Philippines, we get an average of 20 storms a year, and we name them alphabetically. So the name is L, start with L. So this is the 12th already that has hit the country since the start of the year. The typhoon hit the country a few hours after my plane left. So that's why I'm here and not there. And I'd like to thank the AMIS project for the invitation to have me here. And of course, the Italian government for having us here in Milan amid the excitement of the expo. Okay, I hope the order of presentation of commodities does not indicate the importance or significance that the commodity has. Rice is an important commodity, especially for the Philippines and many other countries in Africa and Asia. Does anybody know what is the per capita consumption of rice global? Anybody with a guess? Okay, we consume around 54 kilos of rice per capita, average. And you might say to yourself, well, I don't eat rice at all, or if ever, just very little. So where is this consumption coming from? In Asia and Africa. In the Philippines, the Filipinos eat an average of 114 kilos of rice a year. And it's even more than that in some countries in the region. So, as you know, the Philippines and Thailand are not G20 countries, but we are in this project precisely because we have the potential to influence significantly trade in rice at the international level. At one point, the Philippines was the biggest importer of rice, while Thailand was the biggest exporter of rice. Okay, so I'm happy to make this presentation on behalf of the Secretariat. I'd like to specifically acknowledge the contribution, or the main contribution of Ms. Concepcion Calpe, Concha, and of course under the watchful eye of Abby for the preparation of the materials that we have here today. The presentation that I make today relies on the supply and demand forecast as of early October. That's within the month. And already the figures differ from those presented in the latest AMIS project appraisals, which is contained in the Rice Market Monitor, which came out in the, when is it, Concha? The last, a few weeks ago. So even as we speak here, some, in fact, changes have already been made, which shows us that volatility that our friend from Malaysia and our friend from Bloomberg have expressed concern about is not just about prices. It also extends to our estimates and forecasts, so that what we are talking about today could very easily change tomorrow. But as you know, that is the beauty of statistics. Sometimes statistics is defined as the science of making decisions in the face of uncertainty. And so that's what we are doing here today, trying to grapple with decisions at the economic and political levels in the face of all the uncertainty that we face. The presentation focuses on the rice market situation for the current season, which is 2015 ending 2016. Much of it depends on the performance of crops on the ongoing crop on 2015. And as this season will only conclude by 2016, that's around July next year, when the northern hemisphere countries will have harvested their secondary crops, the current outlook could still be subject to significant changes. World production in 2014 was disappointing, just matching the 2015 utilization. Okay, world production has been increasing for quite some time, but in 2015 started to dip. And in fact, in 2015, world production is now forecast to fall short of the utilization for the next season. And these two seasons depart from the trend between 2005 and 2013, when world production surpassed consumption on a continuous basis, and therefore resulting in a steady accumulation of world reserves. We are seeing a change to that trend. And in fact, if current forecasts are confirmed, world rice inventories in 2016 would fall by almost 8 million tons. This overall current outlook for the rice market points to a tightening of the world supply-demand conditions next year. After falling slightly already in 2014, world production is forecast to contract by another 0.5% in the current year to some 492 million tons in milled rice equivalent. Although this is small, these anticipated declines contrast with the 1.8% average growth observed in the past 10 years. So it's really a slowdown in production. And the main reason for that is cited. The main reasons cited for that are adverse weather conditions. This is true for either too hot or too wet weather conditions. Although in some countries, less attractive producer prices also discouraged rice cultivation. For instance, in some countries like Republic of Korea and in South America. In 2015, this year, several major producers were hit by adverse weather. In particular, we have drought in India and Thailand. And also we have erratic rainfalls that have impaired or are threatening to impair crops in other countries. We have late onset of the rainy season or insufficient rainfall in Australia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Cambodia, Nepal, Laos PDR, Korea, but also in Cuba, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the United States. Very much the same situation that you must have heard about the corn crop and other crop situations. But on the other hand, you had floods in Argentina, Myanmar, Pakistan, Madagascar, and Nigeria. So much of these countries' output shortfalls are expected to be compensated. However, even with these shortfalls, we do have gains, but the gains are not enough to offset the losses, so ending in a 0.5% drop in production. Gains coming from Bangladesh, mainland China, Indonesia, and Brazil. Okay, the rice conditions for AMIS countries, as presented by GeoGlam, with all those problems in weather conditions, we still assess China and India to our basically favorable conditions. But in 3 countries, at least, you have something to watch out for. In Indonesia, you have to watch out for the drought. It could have a significant impact. Thailand as well. And the Philippines is a unique case. You are threatened by typhoons, and you are also threatened at the same time by drought. We can discuss this slide in detail if you want, but all it says is that to focus on the El Niño phenomenon, that is like an overarching weather phenomenon that is affecting rice production. The first slide on your left is the just probabilities of occurrence of drought for red and normal conditions for green. So as you can see, starting the last quarter of this year, there was almost all weather models indicate that El Niño, there will have 100% chance of having El Niño. And this chance will only dissipate sometimes towards the middle of next year, when the probability of having neutral conditions in green will match the probability of having an El Niño. The one on the right, on the other hand, indicates the sea surface temperature anomaly, which is a measure of how strong the El Niño is going to be. And those peaks, the peaks in yellow or gold, indicate intense or bad El Niño years. The last probably the most intense El Niño that we have in recent history happened in 1997, 1998. The figure at the bottom is just starting. The anomaly is just starting to go up. It's around 1.6, getting close to 2 degrees above the normal temperature. However, many models indicate that this can get worse in the next few months. I myself do not like to share the pessimism, but the models seem to indicate that this might be as bad an El Niño as the one that we had in 1997. Much of the erratic, okay. Now, because of this, condition, if this will last until the middle of next year, as predicted, it may jeopardize crops that are cultivated over the last quarter of this year and early next year, which includes Northern Hemisphere secondary crops. And although most of the 2015 secondary crops are grown under irrigation, the lack of rainfall during this period has resulted in below normal water reserves or water levels in reservoir, which is likely to contain plantings in the coming months. As you know, in the Philippines, in the last few months, the talk has been of water rationing, because when there is competition between industrial use, household use, and irrigation, irrigation becomes the last priority. And even so, we need to control the use of water in the household. So we have been preparing for water rationing. You know, when you have no water coming out of your taps for hours. And so we were praying for rain. And so this shows that you have to be careful what you pray for. You might get it and much more very much more of it. Okay, so in the case of the Philippines, the production here, after a continuous growth for the last 6 years, we are forecast to, the production is forecast to decline in 2016. As it is right now, the forecast decline is small. It's not that significant. However, even as we speak, all the 11 provinces that was hit by the typhoon Lando were major rice-producing provinces, and we have a double whammy here. We were able to plant late because the rainy season came late. And because it is late, instead of harvesting late September, early October, we are harvesting only now. And so, being hit by this typhoon, there is really a potential for big losses. And as you know, many people do not know this, the biggest damage to rice in El Niño years do not come from the drought, but they come from the typhoons that happen within that year. So flooding instead of course you lose something because you are not able to plant, etc. But you lose more when you have planted and then the heavy rains come. Okay, so we are not yet sure about these numbers, and like Australia, we are reviewing the numbers as soon as we have more information. Okay. This is the end of season rice reserves for 2016, which I had indicated earlier, and thanks to Seth for giving some indication of what might happen. Under current prospects, the world production, both in 2014 and 2015, would not be fully sufficient to cover the anticipated world consumption next year. So the difference will have to be covered by releasing supplies from stocks. Okay. And at the global level, stocks carried over in 2016 are forecast to be drawn down by around 7 million tons, still keeping world inventories in 2016 at a comfortable level anyway of around 164 million tons. The supply-to-use ratio that Seth has shared with you earlier on rice is will in fact fall from 34% to 32%. 32, around one-third. So that means stocks alone could sustain us for about 4 months of world consumption. As production is forecast to drop in several of the major exporting countries, like India, like Pakistan, like Thailand, and the USA, their exports are still expected to be large because they're holding the stocks, and some countries will be needing them because of the shortfall in production. So there will be an increase in trade that will result from this situation of shortfall of production in some countries. The stock to disappearance ratio will fall likewise from 23% to 17% next year, giving us a warning that the global rice market could be heading towards tighter market conditions by the close of the 2000 season. For the Philippines, the closing stocks are given here, although they're still high, around 67 days worth of stocks. It is in fact forecast to decrease from 2.568 to 2.445. Good for 67 days. And for your information, we use this analysis or this information to decide how much we need to import, because the Philippine Food Security Policy says that we should have, by the beginning of the next season, 90 days worth of stocks. So 67 is short of that. That gives us a basis for importing how much additional stocks we need to import. Despite the ambitious rice self-sufficiency objectives of some countries like the Philippines, which I'm going to discuss in a little while, countries have come to rely increasingly on trade to meet their requirements, and this is the reason why we expect imports to grow by 2.2%. 10 years ago, international trade for rice was very, was very thin, at around 7%. It was even thinner before that. Today, it's estimated at 9%. We must note, however, and I'd like to share this with you, that the trade estimates have been scaled up since 2012 to account for informal rice flows to mainland China, originating to a large extent from Vietnam. These are movements that are unrecorded, and AMIS has a way of estimating these quantities. With many large consuming countries anticipated to face tightening of supplies of rising domestic prices in 2015, the world import demand is anticipated to rebound next year. The increase would be sustained by large purchases of countries like Indonesia, the Philippines, and Iran, and also in Africa, principally in Nigeria. And this is, if there's anything that will keep this, that will mitigate this, it will be the depreciated currencies, because imports will cost more to the importing countries. According to the latest AMIS estimates, which include the informal trade flows, China mainland has become the biggest major importer of rice in the world. Although the country is estimated to hold large supplies in stocks, government high domestic price policy continues to make imports attractive. Okay? However, the government policy of trying to clamp down on informal cross-border trade may reduce the overall shipments in 2016. The Philippine imports, this is probably the value of this slide is not in the numbers themselves, but in what these numbers mean to policy, and especially in relation to the last slide that I'm going to present later on. What I'd like you to notice at this point is that all the way to 2010, we had imported more than 2 million metric tons. This was during the period when the Philippines was one of the highest importers, if not the highest importers of rice. Suddenly, in 2011, all the way to 2014, imports dropped significantly. This is when government declared rice self-sufficiency as a goal, which meant that we will allow imports, but only up to the minimum access volume committed in the WTO, which was around 600,000 metric tons. But not more than that. You will see later on the price that we had to pay for this. And after that, in this year, we had allowed the import of 1.5 million metric tons. And already for next year, we are forecasting to import close to 1 million metric tons again. Okay, let's not go through that anymore. Okay, now for this one, for exports, we are forecasting Thailand and India to be the leading exporters, and along with Vietnam, Pakistan, and the United States. Even Thailand, which is heading towards a poor paddy season for the second year in a row, may be in a position to export more this year because it has the stocks. And as government continues especially to strive to reduce the size of public stock holding, which are still very large. Other countries likely to sell more in 2016 are Pakistan and Vietnam and Myanmar and Cambodia as well. International rice prices are falling in all market segments, practically all market segments. And perhaps the economists should have a heyday explaining this. Why? Why are the prices going down? For all commodities, actually, as indicated here, we have identified 4. Okay. This is the case of, this is my last slide, which I wanted to return to explain how our policy and self-sufficiency and decreased imports has resulted in this. You have a pregnant curve. The green curve out there is the prices in 2014. This is the end of the period of 4 years when we did not authorize imports. So the price that we had to pay in 2014, prices shot up from the farm to the wholesale and to the retail levels. At the farm, in case you did not know, the government has a 17 peso support price for rice. But the price of rice in last year was much higher than the support price. 18 pesos, it started at 18 or 18.50, and then it reached all the way to 21 pesos before coming down to the level that it is now. And the broken line in violet are the prices this year, and so they're back to where they should be after the imports for 2015. The wholesale and retail prices are also behaving in accordance with the farm gate price, and as well in accordance with the international prices. So that's all that I can share with you about the rice market. The rice market monitor is one good document which I'd like to invite everybody to see and read. It is a very comprehensive everything on rice. It's a very comprehensive document. Thanks to the Secretariat, it has all dimensions on rice. Production, imports, exports, prices, stocks, and it discusses the case of each region, each sub-region, and each country that matters, and including the policies that influence the behavior of all these dimensions of the rice market. So thank you very much. Thank you.